Let's now see in this lecture how we can test for errors using Jest. And let me tell you from the start, it will be an interesting journey. Let's start lightly in our utils class that we worked with until now. Let's make a check before returning this to uppercase. Let's make a check if we are passing an empty string or undefined. Let's throw an error because it will be difficult to return an uppercase. So here I will make a simple check if our argument, and I will make, the truthfully check. So if our argument is the empty string or is undefined, then we should just throw an error. And let's just say invalid argument, exclamation mark. All right, this is our simple check, and let's now test it in our utils test suite. So I will use the same describe that we did before. You can pick another one, doesn't really matter. Let's just make some room right here. Let's just remove these consoles right here and let's create another test. Copy and paste. And here let's just say should throw error on invalid argument. Invalid argument like this. And let's just say I will use a function right here. We will see 3 ways in which we can test for errors in Jest. Let's make some room right here. So what we want right here is to pass an empty string. All right. And then we want to expect for an error. Well, the right way in which we can do this with Jest is by wrapping the code that throws an error inside a different function. So here I will create a function. I will call it expect error. And here we will call our function that we expect to throw an error. We will just invoke it right here. And now we can inspect our expect error function. And the method that we will be using is to throw right here. This method just checks for throwing an error. We can also directly check for the error that is thrown. So here we will say to throw error, and here we can check for the argument. I will call invalid argument. All right, let's see if this is working until now. Let's only call this and let's see if this is working. All right, our error is thrown if we are using a function. Let's also see how we can check for errors using an error function. So I will just copy this code right here, and here we will use an arrow function, and we will just wrap the code that is throwing errors inside a arrow function. Very simple. So here, instead of directly calling an function, we will just put the code that we want, that we expect to throw an error right here. And this is a much simpler test. The difference right here is that we don't have a reference to the function that throws, so we only can call it or can assert it only once. Let's see if this is working. Let's see. All right, and our test is still passed. And I will show you yet another way in which we can assert for errors, and with this occasion we will also practice some other Jest assertions. So again, I will copy the code, and here we will say we are checking for invalid arguments, try with a try catch block. Try catch block right here. Let's make some room, and first of all we should wrap our code that throws an error inside a try catch block. And again, here we should put our code that actually throws an error, and then we can make assertions based on the error that is thrown. So here we can expect that our error, and we can use the method to be instance of, and here we can pass the error, and we are checking that this object that we are receiving right here is an instance of error. Also here we can check that this error has a property, so we can use another method called to have property. And here we are checking for the message property of our error, and again we can check for the message. Here we say invalid argument exclamation mark. Let's see if this also is working. So npm test. And yes, also checking for errors with a try catch block is also working. There's an important discussion regarding this last approach that we checked with a try catch block, because this is an incorrect test. Well, we are checking for errors, but if for some reason we are trying this piece of code and it doesn't throw an error, then it won't reach our expect checks and the test will still pass. So there's a problem with this test. Let's see if we are just not returning an error right here. We are not throwing an error. And let's only run this test. So I will remove this only right here and right here. And let's only run this test and let's see if it passes or not now that we removed the arguments. And as you can see, the test still passes even if we removed the throwing of an error. So this last test has a problem. How we can fix it? Well, we should make sure that after we expect an error, we should also reach a point in which we shouldn't. So the built-in function for this is just fail. So if I call here just fail, and here I should say should get string and yeah, pass the arguments right here, pass a meaningful message. So get string info should throw error for invalid argument exclamation mark, and let's see if this approach is working. I will tell you from the start it won't, because there's a bug with Jest, but let's run this. Well, our test is failed, but not for the reason that we are expecting. It tells us that fail is not defined. So I was expecting that this fail or this test should fail with this message that we put right here. And I checked the documentation and the GitHub page of Jest, and this is a known error. It has already almost 2 years since it is passed, and it says that this fail is not defined. Well, it is open even over this much time, but someone here proposed a workaround for this problem. So I will still go to our test and let's make sure that it fails if it reaches this point. So the workaround for this error is very simple. Here in the callback I can pass an argument, and this done is a done callback. And now if I will call this done right here, you will see that our test fails the way it should. So now if I call npm test, it will say, hey, failed with this message that we were expecting. So this approach works. And if we are looking at the documentation of Jest, let's open our types. Let's see if I can open it. Let's see why it's working. So I will just navigate through the documentation of Jest and see why this done works. Just on the exercise, I will control click this it. This it is an alias for just it. And as you can see here, we have this provides callback that we are using. This provide callback has this callback with a done callback, the one that we just called. And if I'm opening this implementation right here, you will see that it just fails. So if we call this, it just fails the test. So this approach works. I don't know why this is built this way, and I don't know why this fail option from Jest is still not fixed, but this is a great workaround. Well, this implementation is still not complete. If we are passing this done callback, we should also call it when we are done with our test. So right here, we are done. And if we pass it without any arguments, then our test will work. Otherwise, our test will time out. Let's see if this implementation is working. npm test. And yes, this implementation works. So we saw in this lecture 3 ways in which we can test for errors. The most straightforward way is with the expected error function wrapper, and then we can just check to throw and to throw error. We saw variation on this, but we also saw some great insight on Jest if we are testing for errors using a try-catch block.